people have no hope that God is real. They, the one employee was talking to me about the particular group that she worships with, and she was saying, I have spent a lot of time researching things we do. And she proceeded to say to me, it's very complicated, and I don't understand why we do it, and it doesn't make any difference. And there was a sense with her that if I jump through all the hoops and I do everything that I'm trained to do, that still does not guarantee me God is going to step into a situation. And she said to me, so I need you to really pray for me. And I really did reflect on that day, and I think I got insight into people, I got insight into things around me that maybe I didn't understand the depth of it. But we carry hope that God is really real. And we carry hope that what we have is not what you do, but who He is in you. And that you can have a relationship with Him that has nothing to do with doing. And there was a particular thing that she was talking about that she said, why do we do this? It's ridiculous. Why am I doing this? There's no purpose in this. Why do I have to do this? And you know, we realize that not only do we bring hope God is real, we bring hope that God wants a relationship. And so if I really had to say salt, what is an aspect of salt when it comes to seasoning meat, I would say that we're hope carriers. And if we're not hope carriers, then we need to find out what's wrong with us that we're not hope carriers. And the more I thought about the trip there, and the more I thought about what I heard and what I saw, I realized that not only is it that we bring hope, but that they feel we are hope. And so when we've lost our hope, then we've lost our saltiness. And so in the process of driving around this week and taking Pastor D to so many doctor's appointments and that kind of thing, walking in and out of different kinds of situations, I realized that if I had to say the major component of hope, I would say it's faith. And God began to talk to me about that's why I feel such an urgency that people come to faith school, that we're talking about the blood. And I shared something with you, and I don't know whether it was last Sunday or last Wednesday, but I'm reading a very, very old book. And the author of that book quotes an older theologian. And I shared the quote with you. The older theologian that preceded this 1851 was talking about how a theologian had talked to two generals. And the one general said to the other general, I have the bravest soldiers in the world. And the other general looked at them and said, well, I may not have the bravest soldiers in the world, but I have the soldiers that'll stay on the battlefield 15 minutes longer than the other ones. And I looked at that and it was like, oh, what is that general saying? A general is saying faith overcomes where we're not courageous. Faith overcomes where we may doubt. Faith overcomes where we may have fears. Faith is the thing that overcomes the way we look at circumstances and situations. Faith overcomes what we need. And I know it's silly But this whole thing that happened on Friday was a very interesting thing for me, because Pastor Corey was standing there saying to me, I wish the pizzas didn't cost so much money. I wish we could do this a cheaper way. I feel bad about spending all this money. And I was trying to say to her, it's okay. We'll work it out. We'll just move around it, because it's the kids' Christmas party, and we'll move around it. And several of the youth were standing there, and one of the young adults, and it was very interesting to me, the one young adult's response. And then when I brought them all back, and they got more than they needed, there was a whole sense of, wait a minute, he heard our conversation. Now, for me, marking our young adults and our youth is one of the major things we do, because we're instilling faith in another generation. So Pastor Corey and Sky were just laughing and joking, and they said, boy, I wish that I had said we needed icing. I wish I had asked him for icing. Pizza's great, but I wish I had asked him for icing so we could do our gingerbread houses. And I go back, and there's over 30 cans of frosting that comes in the next load. And so I don't remember whether it was Sky or Corey or Pastor Corey, but one of them said, shoot, we should have asked for graham crackers. And as I walked out of the door, I realized, you see, that's the hope we bring, is, oh, wait a minute, we got the pizzas. Oh, we got the frosting. Oh, if we'd have just mentioned it, we would have gotten the graham crackers. And so that's another aspect of hope that we bring into a situation, and that is that we let people know that if you make your needs known, there will be an answer to that. There'll be a response to that. And that's hope. But when you boil it down, that's faith. And I think that we realize that saltiness in seasoning meat has to do, not only do we bring hope, but listen to me, we bring faith. And people watch us to see, is there faith? Is there going to be something there? And I was awakened at 7:30 in the morning by an individual, and I was very surprised to hear from them at that time of the morning, and they were sharing with me some very serious issues and very serious political issues, and they were on the phone with me. And so, you're saying, all right, God, why am I having this conversation? Knowing where we were going this week. So why am I having this conversation? When you salt with hope and you salt with faith, you make a pathway for somebody to call you when they're overcome. And it wasn't that this individual expected me to give them a prescription to solve the problem. That's not what they thought was going to happen. They thought I was going to talk them through the stage of where they were. And they thought I was going to give them creative ideas. And they thought that I was going to encourage them that this was fixable. And as I process that for tonight, that's the next thing of hope we bring with us in the kingdom of God. Things are fixable. And that's seasoning. But when we break that down one more time, that's faith. And so what I realized is that what God is doing is we have taken the word faith to mean I'm a person of faith. We've taken that word to mean, I'm spiritual. I have a God consciousness. But God wants to change that definition So that what the definition means is that I'm not religious and I'm not spiritual. I'm just somebody that knows my God. And because I know my God, I can present faith. I can present expectation. And I realized that hope and faith are missing dominantly in the world today. And that's what people are looking for. And we get the thank you meals from a particular place. And I walked in to do some business because we have several of these thank you meals to take. And the individual said to me, "Oh, I can't help you because so-and-so isn't here because his father was rushed to the hospital and it's really bad." And they just went on in the negative. And I let them go. And I said, okay, so now we're going to pray for his father. And we're going to see God do a miracle. Now, this is the next aspect of hope. Hope breaks negative. And the majority of people live in the negative. They live in negative expectation. They live in just the assumption that everything is going to end up in a very negative form. And so again, we bring hope, but it breaks down to faith. So if I would now say to you, how does that expand your concept of seasoning? What would you say? Brings light to the world. Brightens it up.
I had soup that was no salt soup, and it tasted like nothing. But as soon as you add the salt, it brightens everything, and you taste what should be. Not that you add a lot of salt, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I know.
So, yeah. What's that? Gives it flavor. So the world without God is without flavor.
Without flavor.
They have nothing.
Which
And
is why.
They don't know that they're missing that.
Which
So
is
the brightness
why.
comes in.
What she just said is why Jesus did the next verse. You're a city on the hill. The light shows. And we realize that, believe it or not, seasoning is exactly what she said it is. It brings light to dark places. So not only do we bring hope, but we bring light. And Jesus wanted to make sure we understood that, so he made sure that the next verse that we're going to look at covers that aspect of it. What else does it help you focus? Stability. Stability. But again, stability is hope and faith. So you realize that what Jesus was actually telling us is that we need to invade the world with hope and faith. Salt was sprinkled on sacrifices. How many of you are familiar with the Old Testament sacrifices and know that salt was prescribed to be added to certain sacrifices? Any idea why? It would smell.
Does it cleanse it?
No. It's more pleasing to God, but why? Okay, the aroma comes up and he smells the aroma. That's number one. Number two, salt was a commodity. Do you realize that when the sacrificial system was set up, Salt was like money, and it was valuable. And so because it was valuable, when it was added to a sacrifice, it was considered to be giving the best that you had. And so when we operate in the world, we're supposed to be a commodity. And the commodity is this: we do everything with excellence. We do everything with value. We add value to wherever we are. We add value to whatever we do. And we can be seen to be people that add value. And so I want you to think about what that means. And what that means is that when we come into a situation and we bring hope and we bring faith, we do it in such a manner that it is valuable, it's taken seriously, it's honored, it's something that people look at. And as we think about what God wants us to do and be in the world, He wants us to give the world the best presentation we can, the best of us, the best of our spiritual knowledge, the best of our spiritual training. He wants us to give them the best. And you think about the wine that he made at the wedding, and the governor of the feast said, "You're not like anybody else. You saved the best to last." And he said, everybody else, when everybody's had enough wine, they're filled to the brim, then they give the worst wine. But you gave the tastiest wine at the end. And why was that so remarkable to the governor of the feast? He didn't expect it, but what was the result of giving the best wine at the end of the feast? Say it again. It was a better fare. And what people remember is what they experienced last. And so Jesus is saying to us, don't just carry your gift and be resentful that you carried your gift. Don't carry your gift and be resentful of the time. Don't carry your gift and make the people think that they're a burden to you. Don't carry your gift and make it something that people think you really didn't want to do it. So we're to be valuable. We're to present value. We're to show them how much value God holds them with. People need to know God values them, because people have such a bizarre view of God. The more I'm out, the more I'm listening to people, the more I'm around. Most of the doctors Pastor D is going to right now are Jewish, and when I listen to them and I listen to their thought processes, and I listen to how they view life, I have never seen so much disillusionment in my life. And this is people that should not be disillusioned. These are people that they are able to afford things, and they're able to do things, and they're respected. But nonetheless, there is so much disillusionment. And so I realize that as we're a seasoned sacrifice, we're out there to take away disillusionment. We're out there to take away that edge. And, you know, when you're out there and you're listening to people, I have been so startled as to the depth of disillusionment out there right now. And so we bring, with our hope and with our faith and with our seasoning and with our excellence, we bring that thing that brings refreshment, because we're giving them the opposite of disillusionment. Anybody else have anything that springs? Chess. Use your mic, please.
I just wanted to add something to that because of what you were saying about the best wine at the end. God was saying that to me because when we gave out the presents, we gave out the big giveaway, then I gave them out again on the 22nd and the 23rd. And as it always happens, more stuff comes in as the days go on. And on the 23rd, at the end, like the last family that day got some of the best presents, some of the biggest presents, like huge gifts that had come in for, little kids. And I was like, wow. And that's the scripture that I was thinking of. And it was like that illustration. And I couldn't quite wrap my head around how he was until now. Until when you said it, like it ruins the disillusionment that people have with God. That it's not like, oh, I'm the last person to come here. I'm going to get the leftovers or something little for my kids. The people that came at the end were so blessed, and they got some of the biggest things for their kids. And I was like, that's how God is, that he sees each one of them. And I don't know, it's every time we do it, I know that I love doing the toy giveaway because he teaches me something new every time. And that's my favorite part of it. And so that was like a new thing that I saw. And I had seen that in the years, going on. But it was so it was almost like spotlighted in that moment for me. And I just remember that. And it just, and even as we go along, like sometimes the kids that come at the end, we give a little bit extra. Or it's like, oh, we're at the end now, like throwing a couple extra stocking stuffers, put an extra gift in. But I feel like that's how God is. He doesn't say just because you're late or you couldn't get here until today, you get the scraps. He doesn't give anybody scraps. And he allows us to then do that even in the natural, where we're not giving out scraps at the end. We're giving out some of the best things. So I just wanted to, yeah.
Anybody else in that area? Okay. The third thing that salt is used for is that when we are plowing a soil that we know is pretty good, and we are expecting that soil to yield a really good product. We make a solution of salt and we spray it on that soil. We turn that soil over, we come back around. Have you ever been driving through farm country and seen in the field like a big canister of liquid? You can tell it was holding liquid, and it had a spray nozzle on it. It's because they're going back. If the field really looks good and the soil really looks good, then they're going to spray that salt solution on that soil because it brings a bigger crop. So salt in the world, when we are working in people's lives, when we are moving people toward relationships with God, when we are talking to them about their relationship with Jesus, then we begin to realize that what we're doing is we're putting salt in that soil because we're expecting a bigger crop. And so salt encourages reproduction. And salt encourages bigger production. Because when the salt goes in the soil accepts that saltiness, and it helps get rid of, it's a fertilizer. That's exactly what we use it for. It's a fertilizer. And that's what we do. We're fertilizers. Salt was always used as an example of an everlasting covenant. And so in a world where everything is throwaway, in a world where we have more lawyers that have gone into contract law have gone more into fighting people for not keeping their agreement, not keeping their word. We have more lawyers now drawing up more ironclad contracts for people to sign. And then we have more lawyers who are out there helping people break contracts. And so we have lost what we had back in the 1800s when somebody would shake their hand with another person and that deal was settled. And there were no papers and there were no lawyers. It was done totally on word. And those covenants were kept. And those covenants were better kept than the contract covenants we have today, because it was based on an everlasting covenant between you and that person. So what we bring with us is that when we say to people, okay, let's use the toys, because she brought it up. When we say to people, yes, you can come. We know it's December 24th. In fact, she even had a family that came after Christmas, and the woman said to her, I thought my older kids would understand, but they didn't, and I just didn't have the money for Christmas. Do you have anything left? And our website says, as long as supplies last. And so Jessica could say to her, even though it was after Christmas, you come, we've got stuff. And she went home and was able to do a late Christmas, but she was able to do a Christmas because we kept our word. We lived up to what was on our website. And so people don't do that. People, when we say when supplies last, we mean as long as supplies last. So if you come after Christmas, you can still tap into it. We don't say, okay, well, as of December 24th, we're done, and even if we've got something, we won't give it. We're saying you can get help as long as supplies last. And that's a covenant. And we, as born-again Christians, our word is to be greater than a contract. And when we get involved with somebody, if we say, I'm going to do that, then we have to do that. It's not something, there's several things going on, and I had to break a commitment to a church because of Pastor D and another situation, and I was very upset that I had to break my word and say, I now can't come. Because we need to be people that if we agree to something, we do it, no matter what happens, but we don't. We have a tendency to be very much like the world. And so, I put it off another month and just said, I can't come right now, but I'll come next month. So that it wasn't just, I'm not coming, it was, just give me time, I'll make that commitment. And so we don't realize how much the world is looking for us to keep our word. And that boils back down to, we're examples of the Lord Jesus Christ. Is he going to keep his word? The promises in the book, are they sure? The promises in the book, can they count on them? Can they hang their life on them? And that's why we bring hope. That's the next aspect of hope we bring. That is that God always keeps his word. And that his word is always there. And we can always count on his word. And we can always expect him to meet his word. And so the problem with the church, and I'm looking overall, I travel among a whole bunch of churches. I talk to a whole bunch of pastors. And so the problem with the church overall is that we don't believe he keeps his word. We don't believe that if he says, I'll heal you, he'll heal you. We don't believe that he'll supply our needs according to his riches and glory. For me, that's what Friday was all about, was him teaching, I will supply your needs according to my riches in glory. And so we're doing that. We're representing an everlasting covenant. So what does that rouse in people's minds? Okay, so the next aspect of
Talking about your covenant with God.
what realizing that we're salt and realizing that we're to do that in the world, what does that rouse in your
As far
thought
as your
process?
word is concerned,
Right.
you gave me your word, yes.
Right.
Like you said, way back in the olden times, you had a hand. The mic. Yes, back years ago, you had a handshake and you gave your word. You never broke your word. And that was a covenant. And that's like the Lord's covenant with us. He will not break his covenant. His
Right.
covenant is a better covenant because it's sealed in the blood. And even way back when, because you're part Native American, right? And you know what a blood covenant is. When they made a blood covenant, nobody broke that covenant.
Nobody.
Because if you broke that covenant, there was a penalty to pay,
Yes.
a big penalty to pay. Even in Africa, wherever, they made blood covenants, and they kept their word. You're only as good as your word.
Right.
When you had to say, me, when I was younger in the streets, we had a saying: you might not have anything, but you had your word. Your word is your bond. You
That's
don't
right.
break your word. They know you. They see you. Well, that guy, yeah. Well, you know what? He keeps his word. That's how they know you. Otherwise,
You're just like
you're
everybody
not
else.
worth 2 cents.
Mm-hmm.
If we can understand the covenant that God made with us and just believe everything that he says, because like you said, he doesn't lie. He doesn't
doesn't lie.
fail. What he says in there, it will. But we have to learn, when he says you're healed, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you feel, no matter what you see. With faith, you got to have patience. Faith and patience go hand in hand. It's like Pastor was saying, hope. Hope and then faith. To me, hope is a goal setter. The things I hope for are here. Now, I obtain what I hope for through my faith in God, through his word, because he'll never let you down. He never
Never
will.
will.
And I speak for myself. Through my experience, I know. Trust me when I tell you, God is God. He's no joke. He'll always come through. But like I stand on Mark 11, 23, 24. When I pray, I believe that I receive. When do I believe that I receive? When I prayed, I got it. I see it in the spirit. Then I also ask him to give me the strength to endure until it does manifest. Everybody's looking for fast, quick, and in a hurry, but the same way it comes fast, quick, and in a hurry, if you don't have your word and faith built up to enforce, you'll lose it. I guarantee you'll lose it.
That's right.
Because the enemy is right there. He comes to what? Steal, kill, and destroy, and he will. But thank God his word doesn't fail. His covenant is, forget about it. It's something else.
When people make blood covenants, at least in my ethnicity, blood covenants are not entered into lightly. Promises are not made lightly, because if you don't keep your word, not only are you killed, but your family's killed. And it means that, okay, if you look at it and you go, I really shouldn't have made that blood covenant because I'm going to have to go to war now, and I could easily die in this war. You have to go to war because you cut it. And in the process of cutting a blood covenant, you realize that part of that covenant is your enemy is my enemy. And you see that Jesus made that statement. The enemy of your soul is my enemy. And you realize that that's the power of the blood covenant that Jesus cut, was that kind of thing. And we have a story in the Bible where there was a covenant cut. And if you remember when Joshua went into the land, a group of natives there deceived him and brought old bread and old and said, okay, we come from a far area. And then he got there and he found out they were right there. But it didn't matter if he was deceived, the covenant was made, and it was a permanent covenant. So now we go forward into 1 Samuel, and we see where the Jebusites were being attacked by the Amorites, and the Amorites were saying, we're going to pluck out your right eye. You're going to surrender to us, and we're going to pluck out your right eye. And what they said to them was, the Jebusites, we're going to see if we can find help from anywhere. And what did they do? They sent an envoy to Saul, and they said to Saul, we have a covenant with you, and you promised to protect us from our enemies. Now, they didn't know if Saul would keep it, but it had been promised by Joshua, so they were counting on a covenant made all those hundreds of years before that. And what did Saul do? He rallied Israel. They went and defeated the Amorites. Why? There was a covenant. Saul didn't make it, but he honored it, and he honored the covenant that Joshua made. And so we didn't make the initial covenant with God when Jesus went to the cross. That was a covenant with them. But what did Jesus do in John 17? He said, I don't just pray for these, but I pray for those who will come after that and believed on my word. So what did he do? He sowed us into a blood covenant. And he sowed us into an active covenant that we can count on today because there was a covenant. So salt preserves. So we realize that the problem in the world, and I have said this all over this nation in every country that I have been in, the present condition in this world is totally the church's fault. We are to blame for every horrible thing going on everywhere. Why? Because we weren't salt. Because we didn't stay active. Because we didn't do what God told us to do. We weren't out there touching society. We weren't out there changing laws. We weren't out there taking stands for righteousness' sakes. And as a result of that, because we didn't preserve the world had nothing. The world absolutely had nothing. And so it went the way of carnal flesh. So when we look at the mess, and right now we're looking at political messes in several states, and we're looking at corruption that's being exposed in several states, we look at it and we go, how can this happen? It happened because the church stepped out of government. We no longer encouraged our children to become politicians. We no longer actively prayed for our politicians. We no longer actively did everything we could do to touch the lives of every politician that we're given the open doors for. And so you want to know why I take our contacts so seriously, is I realize God gave us open doors. And we have to touch those open doors for the gospel. Whatever that means to us, whatever that costs us, we have to touch those open doors because we're trying to preserve the people involved with the power of God. And it's only the power of God that preserves anybody's life. We can be wonderful counselors. We can be wonderful social workers. We can be wonderful lawyers. We can be wonderful government officials. We can be moral and ethical doctors. But if we don't have Jesus that we bring into those situations, we are not preserving the world. And that was our job. And so Jesus looked at them and he gave us the tenets of the kingdom. Then he gave us the behavioral standards for the kingdom. And he said, you have to be out there and you have to be salt. And you are the salt of the world. You preserve the world. But we have been afraid, we've been intimidated, we've been whatever it is we've been, and we've backed out of so many places that the world is just following the course of carnal flesh. That's just what they're doing. And so how do we hold them accountable when we're not doing our job? Salt is a symbol of wisdom and grace. And it talks about what our words should be salted with. So when you hear that that's an aspect of salt, what does that do to you? What triggers does that produce in you, behavior-wise, thought process-wise, action-wise? What does it produce? Does it make you understand that the conversations that you have with people in the world, there is supposed to be a part of this aspect where people can talk to you and you give them wisdom. Come on, you give them grace. You give them what God tells you to give them. And you don't worry about, does it make sense necessarily, but you're giving them what God told you to give them. If they take that seriously and they do what your suggestion is, then what's happened is that they'll come back to you and say, wow, that advice you gave me really worked. And so what does that give us the opportunity to do? Talk to them about, well, let me explain to you how I could give you that. And it points them to the wisdom of God and how God affects individuals. And if there's one thing that I'm seeing in the connections I'm forming and in the opportunities I'm having, people do not expect God to speak. They don't expect God to involve himself in common everyday problems. They don't expect God to give them something that's practical. And we're the element of God in their lives, giving them practical. Giving them, okay, well, this is what I heard. Whether we say it that way or we let the word work, and then we say it to them, we always have to point them back to the grace and the wisdom of our speech because we're pointing to him. I cannot tell you recently how many times people have, in the recent period of time, particularly through the Christmas holidays, were saying to me, I can't believe you knew what to do. I can't believe that worked. I can't believe. And I was able to say to them, because it wasn't from me. I just listen. I just take dictation. God's very interested in your life. God's interested in your business. God's interested in what's going on with you. God truly wants you to know his reality. And if there's one thing going on right now, is that the church is supposed to be bringing the reality of God into people's life, that God's reality is practical. That God's reality has to do with every decision we make, has to do with everything we do, has to do with everything we consider. Christian and I are working on 2 projects, and we're both waiting to hear God say, is this the time to do them? Should we do those? Should we do something else? Should we hold out to do the generator? Are we at a place where, okay, we now have to address these issues because of this and this? So right now, Christian and I are in the process of gaining information. We're in the process of looking things over. And then we're going to be praying those things through, and it's going to be, okay, well, I honestly think yes, this, or no, that. And then we'll bring it where it needs to be brought for other people to check it out. But right now, we're in the fact-finding mission. Now, I expect God to speak through the men I have coming tomorrow. I have 2 men, one on one project and one on another project. I'm expecting those 2 men to speak so I can hear what God's saying. And then I've got 2 more men coming in the next couple of days to do the thing for the front of the building. And I'm expecting God to give me wisdom. What is it? Is it something that's necessary for now? What are we doing? And so I'm thinking I'm going to hear through the words of the people. People have to be taught that they can listen when there's a situation, when there's a circumstance, when there's a problem. They can listen to the people that are talking to them about that, and they can hear God speak through those people. We have to teach people that God talks. We have to teach people that God is involved in every decision we make, and that God has a plan in every decision that we make. Anybody want to add to that? Anything that brings in anybody's mind? Salt mines under pressure. The salt itself liquefies. Salt has a chemical component that allows it on its own to liquefy. And when in the salt mines it liquefies, it flows to wherever there's a fault line. And there may be a major fault line, but if there is a salt mine involved in that fault line, there will never be an earthquake. Because as the plates shift, it produces pressure on the salt in the mine. The salt liquefies, and the salt flows to wherever the fault is and wherever the crack is. And I grew up in an area that had a salt mine. It also had a major fault. And yet, it's never had an earthquake. And it never will in that region. And so one of the things that happened to us as kids in school is that we took a field trip to the next city over where the big salt mine was. And this salt mine went for miles, just miles. And so as we were in the salt mine, they were teaching us how salt liquefies. And salt under pressure, under shaking, under shifting, liquefies. And it flows like glue. That's just the best way to put it. It acts like glue. And it goes to the cracks in the earth plate. And it seals them together. And I realized that when Jesus said to the church, "You're the salt of the earth," he was saying to us, when everything shakes and there's pressure, because we're salt, we are to liquefy. And we're to be that glue that steps into things, and we fix things. We hold things together in shaking times. And I was thinking about how this country went through many shaking times when you read the nation's history in the 1700s, the 1800s. And what did you always find? You found an active church. And I was preaching in Salem, Mass, and the pastor of that church asked me if I had ever heard of the Black Robe Battalion. And I said I read about them, but I don't know that much about them. And so he took me to the bridge, and he said the pastors at that point in time of the city saw the British coming, and they all wore black robes. And they met the British in the center of the bridge. And the lead pastor, the most verbal pastor, said to the British soldier, "Captain, I don't permit you to come into this city." And they got into a war of words. And of course, the pastors had no weapons at all. But they stood there and they said, "We resist you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ." This city was founded by born-again Christians. It was named Salem because it's to be a city of peace. You are forbidden to disturb the peace of this city. And they withstood the British Army with no weapons at all, 5 men. And the British general turned around and went the opposite way. They never penetrated Salem. Why? Because 5 men stood up under pressure, liquefied, and said, "No, you can't come here. You're absolutely forbidden to come here. You're not going to disturb the peace of this city, because this city was founded by God for God's people, and it was known to be for peace." And so we realize that if we would just tap into God with hope and faith, we could tap into so many answers that would alter society, that would alter the direction we're going, that would alter people's lives. And if we're willing to do that, God will give us opportunities to speak into people's lives. He'll give us opportunities to take stands. He'll give us opportunities to say things. He'll give us opportunities to absolutely place the power of God in something that is a severe fault line. The last thing is salt is a building block for health in our bodies. We have to have so much sodium in our body. And when we don't have sodium, our electrolytes go crazy. And if you look at these sports drinks and you look at these other drinks that are out there and you look at their content, there is a high percentage of sodium, because sodium comes in and is a building block. So when you look at all the doctors saying, get off salt, get away from salt, they're robbing from us a building block that we need, that we absolutely require. And so we have to understand that Satan wants to rob the world of this building block. And the way Satan does it is he picks off one born-again Christian at a time. He silences the mouth of one born-again Christian at a time. Whether he does it like he's been doing, as you heard the confession today from Chris, he does it because he throws up in your face, "You're not perfect. You just lost your temper. You just whatever." He'll try to silence us. And what that does is rob the world from a building block of life. And so we wonder why life around us is eroding. It's eroding because the church is no longer salt. So does that add anything? I just picked the 8 major ones. Does that do anything? Anybody?
So when you were talking about salt under pressure liquefies, it just came to my mind. Sometimes people say, like, when they lose their mom, she was the person that held the family together. She was the glue.
Mm-hmm.
And if people know that if they had Jesus in their lives, when their life is crumbling, he is the glue that will hold them all together.
Right.
If they just knew, not just Christians being the glue. They need that themselves.
Yeah.
So if we shared that with people, like when they're like, my body's falling apart, my life is falling apart, I have the glue that will hold it all together.
And that's what the church used to be. Jesse?
So it just made me think of a couple things, but how it's like a derogatory thing to say somebody's like salty, like it's like a negative thing. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, no, it's a good thing. It's like how the world always turns everything the opposite way. So it's almost like being salty is bad. It's almost I don't know. That just made me think of that.
Right.
And then also when you were talking about like the contracts and stuff, like I found that so interesting. I saw my stepfather and my mom, they were buying the house, second house that they, when the house we lived in together, and he bought it from another. They built the house, so they were the original owners of that house. So they were older. Their kids were grown. They were probably, not old, but they were older. Anyway, so they bought the house with a handshake. Like, that's literally how we bought the house. They went back and forth with the numbers for like 2 minutes, and then they shook on it. And I was like, what are you doing? I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, these people are out of their minds. Like, because to me, that's not how you do things. Like, you would never just trust somebody that was their word. And then when you were talking about how the world is the way it is because the church hasn't done what it's supposed to do. So then at some point in the church, because I was thinking, when in culture do we lose that? That a handshake, that your word was your bond, right? That your word meant anything. You could just shake on it. Because I've seen that in like movies. You hear that in old stories, when you watch old like Western movie, they shook on things. But I saw that as a kid. I was like, whatever, 13 when I saw them shake on. It's the only time I've ever seen that actually happen in real life. But I guess it wasn't the culture that lost it, right? So then what you're saying is the church lost that your word meant something, that
Correct.
your word was the bond. So at some point in the church, it has to be relatively recent because that was a recent thing, that my stepfather did it, something that he grew up doing, he knew to do. So it's a recent thing that I think that the church must have lost that.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the time in my generation, that was like a joke if you were going to buy a house with a handshake. To me, that was like absurd. So, it's just, I don't know, it just made me think about that. Like, why? Like, where? Why did the church lose that? What? I don't know. I guess I'm somebody who likes to know why things happen. And I was just thinking about that, but I don't know.
I think that we can trace it back to some components. Again, raised with people of my ethnicity and them looking at society around them. One of the components that they felt eroded that was greed. That people began to say it's all about me. And it seems to have infiltrated the church after World War II, is what I can piece together from my grandfather. And there became a whole concept of what's good for me. I'm going to do what's good for me. I'm not going to do what's good for other people. I'm going to do what's good for me. So that's the only thing that I can say to you is that that seems to have been, from his perspective, looking at society, was that his component was greed. And his other component was he felt that when that was true and somebody could shake on something, there wasn't a selfishness. Life was not about, well, this makes it easier for me. There wasn't a selfishness of, well, this is something that makes my life easier, that makes me feel I can operate. There was a sense that you stepped into situations and you gave your word, and his other view was that it entered America back when all of the broken covenants with the indigenous people were done, where smallpox was put in blankets and promises were never kept, land was never given, the help was never given. And you can go to indigenous lands now, and most of them don't have paved roads, they don't have running water, they don't have sewer systems. everything that they were promised, they don't have. So his view was that when people began to speak with a double-edged tongue, that opened the door over society. And when it starts at the head, it just filters down.
Sorry, just one other thing.
No, okay.
Say it. So when you were saying all that, it just made me, because I haven't thought about seeing them shake on buying the house, like, since, I don't know, I don't remember ever thinking about it. But I spoke up as a kid, and so I basically did say to them, as they were shaking, I'm like, what is wrong with the two of you? This is insane. And or however I put it, my stepfather turned around to me and he said, this is a gentleman's agreement. And this is what gentlemen do. And you could shake on something like this. So it just, and I feel like that's lost too. That concept, that idea in the church even, that you're a gentleman, and there's a standard, I think, as you were talking, that's what made me think, like, there's a standard that was lost in the church of how you conduct yourself. And you don't see that in the church at large today, that idea of being a gentleman, or your word, or that character, I guess, is what you're saying was kind of like lost in the church and in our society.
You see that Paul, which that statement just brings me back to where I was going. You see that when Paul was talking to the Corinthians, when Paul was writing several of his epistles, he makes in general statement, and he says, you owe the saints in Jerusalem everything, and they're in trouble, and we need to take up offerings from you. I know you don't have much, but you need to give what you can give. And then he makes a very interesting statement. He said, and I don't want you embarrassed. And he was looking at them, that if they didn't do this thing, if they didn't see themselves as one with the people in Jerusalem, if they didn't pay back a debt that they owed, that it would be an embarrassment to them. And I think what I was going to put here was that we've lost our embarrassment when we don't do what we're supposed to do. We've lost our embarrassment that we put ourselves on the line, that we don't do whatever we have to do. The day that we took the thank you lunch was a day that we had agreed on that day because the majority of the staff would be present, and it was not convenient for me. And there was something that I was watching the clock with that I knew that I had to get to, having to do with Pastor D. It was not convenient. We had made the arrangement before the doctor's office made the demand. And it would have been easy for me to call and say, I can't come. But I had an agreement. It would have been an embarrassment to me if I hadn't showed up. And I have another thank you lunch coming this Tuesday. And after I agreed, we planned on this for 3 weeks. It's the only time that all of the employees will be together. And we made this plan 3 weeks ago. Pastor D turned around and made a doctor's appointment. And so what I'm going to do, and what I went to that business and I said, I gave my word and I will be here. I hope you have a way to heat the food, because I'm going to bring it early and you're going to need to keep it hot, or you're going to need to heat it up when it comes lunchtime, because now I have to be at an 11 o'clock appointment, so I'm coming much earlier than that to bring your food. Because I made an agreement. I shook on it. I said, yes, I'll be there. So we don't realize sometimes it's not convenient, and it would be easy to back out. But our word is so valuable, and our commitment is so valuable, and the fact that we really are a building block in society. It's imperative that we do whatever we have to do. So now I'm putting pressure on the restaurant so that I can pick everything up at 10, so that I can get it there to get back and pick up Pastor D to get to an 11 o'clock appointment. And so we don't realize that what has happened in society is what my grandfather used to talk to me about with, as he put it, white man's society, is that white man's society is governed by convenience. And so I think that's also a part of the issue. And so when you read this verse, ye are the salt of the earth. But when you look up the word earth, it's not the normal word for earth. And it means land fit for plowing. It means habitation of man and animals. So when you think about it saying is that it's land fit for plowing, it goes back up to this solution that salt is made from that's a fertilizer. And so we are the salt of the earth. We're the salt for land that is plowable. We're fertilizer for land that's plowable, for both animals and humans. We're that thing that comes in and fertilizes seed that's been sowed. So we have to realize that whomever we're dealing with, like this next business that I'm going to, it has a young man in this business who has gone out of his way to imply to me that he doesn't want anything to do with God because of the Christians that's been in his life. And he's talked about the hurts he's gotten in church and how he just doesn't want anything to do with it. And I wasn't doing business with him. I was doing business with the head of that particular business. And he knows nothing about, that I knew nothing about Tuesday. But when I went in there the other day, because, this has been in the plans for 3 weeks, he looked at me and he said, "Are you really coming on Tuesday?" And I said, "I'm really coming. But I have explained to your boss that I'm coming early and you guys are going to have a way to reheat this food." And he said, "Are you really coming?" And I said, "I'm really coming." And he began to talk to me, and you realize that seed has been sown in his life. And something as crazy as a thank you lunch is fertilizer for the seed that's already been sowed. You would not think, okay, when God said, "I want you to do this." Last year, he gave me one place to go. This year, he gave me 4. And you wouldn't think that that is fertilizer. But we're always working with people who are plowable land. They're good soil. They've had seed sown in them. And our fertilizer, our behavior as fertilizer, needs to get into that soil. Needs to be something that they can look at and go. Now, why the boss told him about Tuesday, I don't know. But the way this started was I said to the boss, "I want a day, can you look at everybody's schedule and tell me a day when everybody will be here, because every one of you helped us through this very difficult season." And there was a situation where we needed a lot of information, and it was to protect a grant. And they went out of their way to do extra work. They went out of their way to do something that they really should not have done. And then they didn't charge us for what they did, and they should have. And so I had said to them, we want to say thank you, because God gave me that business as one of the 4. And it was, I want to say thank you. So I said, you all helped. You were all involved. I don't want to bring this on a day when the majority of you are not here. They checked the calendar and got back to me and said to me, the only day we're all going to be together in December and January is January 13th. We made an agreement for January 13th. Now, why that boss told this young man that we were coming on January 13th, I don't know. It was not a conversation involving him. But for some reason, that boss felt the need to tell him. And I think part of it was because I was going to teach this lesson, and God wanted to talk to me about this whole thing for Earth, that there are people out there that are people that are good soil. They're plowable. And I'm a farm girl, so I understood that solution. I understood spraying good soil with salt water. I understood that. I understood what it did. I understood what it did in the component of the soil, what it did as a natural bug repellent, what it did as a natural bird repellent for seed. And so you look at it and you realize, all right, we're now talking about the parable of the sower. And we're that fertilizer that gets that seed in the ground. And so, young man, I understand I wasn't offended. I wasn't angry. I wasn't put off. He said to me, well, I guess I'll know on Tuesday. Now, I'll be there, not because he said that, but because God gave me that business. And God gave me 2 others. So gradually, in these next few weeks, added on to other things, I will be making the same approach. There's another one I'm doing this week on Thursday. I've got 2 this week. And the one of the employees said, you're not really going to do that. And I said to them, yes, I am. And they said, you're not going to really do that. Something will happen. And it was one of those conversations that led me to make the statements I did earlier. I've never seen so much mistrust, and I've never seen so much disillusionment in society. And so I realized that something that sounds so crazy as a thank you lunch is fertilizer in people's lives. And so God may say to you, I want you to do X. And it may not make sense to you. And it may be an effort that goes above and beyond. But what God's after is fertilizer. What God's after is land that's plowable. And so then he goes on and he says, but when salt has lost its savor, and savor is very interesting because you wouldn't think that savor would mean this, but this is what it means, has become foolish. When salt has become foolish. And so you realize one more time that God is taking and Jesus is teaching from a picture purpose that you really are salt. And he's saying when you become foolish. And we become foolish when we discount the God in us, when we discount who we are, when we listen to what Satan tells us about we don't matter, and when we get this attitude that is so much in the world today, and I have really seen it this season more than any other year, and that is people are a number, and that's all they are. We have lost the sight of individual people. We just see numbers. We don't see individuals. And so God is saying to us, you act foolish when you're not salt. You act foolish when you're not what you're supposed to be. And it says, how is it ever going to be salted again? And that definition means, how is it going to ever be seasoned again? Now, I want you to realize that he didn't say that it couldn't be. He said, how is it going to be? And so he has kind of given me some things. I can tell by the clock we're not going to get there, but he's given me some things that restores saltiness. The other thing that it also means is make seasoned again. So I want to move beyond these two verses. So now let's do verse 14. Ye are the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. And I want you to think about that a minute. You wonder, why is it always Israel and the church that is the object of persecution? Why is it Christians and Jews that are always the object of persecution? Why is that? And we can have a whole bunch of ideas. What do you think, Christian? Because it's the truth. Why else? We're different. I think it also has to do with these two verses. We cannot be hidden. Listen, we cannot be hidden when we're good, but we cannot be hidden when we are bad. We cannot be hidden when we're an asset to society, but we cannot be hidden when we are not an asset to society. We can't be hidden. And in the first stop we made with lunch, they were saying to us, oh, this group that represents a particular expression of Christianity always does this. But we've not heard from them this year. They haven't had the decency to tell us they're not doing it. So they're making us follow them around. They're making us pursue them. Next statement. But if they don't follow through, you're going to get everything they were going to get. And we got everything they were going to get. And so you realize that the church cannot be hid. It can't be hid. It can't be hid when it's good, but listen to me, it can't be hid when it's bad. And so when we've lost our power, when we've lost who we are, when we're an empty rain cloud, when we promise rain we don't give, all of those things make people angry with us. But the Bible talks to us about a curse causeless cannot fall. And so when we're not doing what God told us to do, then we give a cause for a curse to fall. And so all of a sudden, Israel didn't do her job. What was Israel's job? God made it very clear to them. What was Israel's job? Spread the light. Cause the world to know about the Messiah. Cause the world to know that the Messiah was coming. Cause the world to know that God had a plan for the earth. They didn't do their job. So what became the job of the church? Share the gospel. We're going to look at it later on in this section on where we are in the kingdom. We were told, go preach the gospel in the whole earth. We're not doing our job. Maybe because we don't want to offend people. And listen, you walk a tightrope. I'm not lying to you. I've been in situations when I prayed the last time for a meeting that the senator had. I was walking a fine line because it was for the entire Republican Party, for the entire state. I was walking a fine line. But this is what the Holy Spirit told me. You ready? The senator knew who you were when he asked you. And he asked you because he knew who you were. So don't fail him by not being who you were. And so they handed me the purpose of the night. And they gave it to me because it was on their invitation. And their purpose was very lofty. One was to bring unity. And I took their invitation. I was careful, but I took their invitation and I said to them, you cannot produce unity without the Lord Jesus Christ. There is no way to get unity separate from him. And I went down all of their principles. And I explained to them how their goal for that night was lofty and right, but they couldn't get it without Jesus. And then I prayed, and I commended them in my prayer for the burden that God had put on their hearts to do it. I didn't say it that way, but that's what I was saying. And then I asked God to give them creative ideas that only he has for unity. One more time, I got off where I was praying, and 3 people, as I walked off, they were very powerful people in the state, grabbed me, and they said to me, I've never heard a prayer like that. I've never heard people say that. Thank you for helping us. Now, we get afraid that we're going to offend people. We have to be careful how we do it, because we are walking a fine line, because the church did get pushed back into a small box. But when God gives us an opportunity, I'll never forget what he said. He knew who you were when he asked you. Don't fail him by not being who you were. And I never thought about it as the fact that we fail people when we're not who we are. But we have to realize when we're not who we are, we fail people. And that puts us in a position where the light is shined on the church when we're good and when we fail. And because we fail, then that puts us up there for persecution because of lack of respect. And Israel stopped doing her job. The church has stopped doing her job, and there is a resurrection coming, and it's coming in the college age. It's coming in the high school age. It's coming in the young adult age. It's coming. There's a whole sense of, wait a minute, I can do something about this. Oh, wait a minute. And they're looking for people that have walked with Jesus and will agree with them and can give them the information, that can give them the support, that can give them the teaching. This is how you live in a world, and you're salt. So he says, you're the light of the world. And that word light is very interesting. Are you ready? It means fire. You're the fire of the world. What makes us fiery? Faith. That's what makes us fiery. And I'm more convinced than I have ever been that when God said to me, you open faith school, and you don't care if 2 people come or 3 people come or 4 people come, you open faith school and you keep faith school open until I tell you otherwise. He was saying, I need to put fire in the inner being of people. And the only way we get fire is faith. Because faith brings hope. Hope brings expectation. Expectation brings transformation. And we are to be the fire of this earth. So I want you to think about those two analogies. We're salt and we're fire. And so because we're salt and because we're fire, and because we've not been doing our job, the world around us has no warmth. And I want to take you back to the story about the young man that says, I guess on Tuesday we'll find out. There is a coldness in this world. There is a suspicion in this world. There is a coldness in relationships, people one to another. Our congregation is not perfect. Please, I'm not saying that it is, but I'm going to tell you something. The comments I get from the world, the comments I get from the senator, the comments I get from people who donate, the comments that I get from businesses, this is what they say. When we get involved with your church, there's an entirely different feeling. And it makes us feel good inside. We're not perfect. We're not as close as I want us to be. We're not as deep much as a family as I want us to be. But we are so different from what the world looks at every day. I've had also people say to me, to go to your church must be very difficult. And I've said, why is that? And they said, because you don't let people operate like people operate. And I never thought about that before. But our congregation may be difficult to go to. Because I'm always after transformation. I'm always after change. I'm always after the thing we got at the mic today. This is what God's doing in me. I'm always after that. Because that is a key to revival. But that's what we're supposed to be. Fire is warmth. Fire is protection. Fire's always been protection. But fire left out of control and fire mishandled causes death and destruction. And so we as a church are either going to be a positive element in the community or we're going to be a destructive element in the community. And I want you to think about all of the things that are transpiring in the Catholic Church and all of the people that are coming out and saying, I was molested by a Catholic priest. I cannot tell you how many people coming in the pantry have opened up to me and said, I was molested as a child. I don't want anything to do with the church. And it's like, I hear you, but that's not every church. That's not who born-again Christians are. That's not what born-again Christians do. And then we get a major scandal, like has just hit the body of Christ, nationally and internationally, that everybody is reeling over, and they can't believe what's coming out. And so again, we are forest fire out of control. And so when this happens, we are destructive to the world instead of productive. And it makes more pressure on the rest of us to produce productive. Said you're a city on a hill, but that's not, the word there is not hill, the word there is mountain. So I want you to think where I'm from is mostly flat, but there's a few rolling hills in the east part of the state, but they're not high hills. But when I was little, I had rheumatic fever, and so they did what they knew to do, and they took me to Colorado to the Garden of the Gods. And I can remember being 5, 6 years old and seeing mountains for the first time and seeing a city or a town that was built on the top of one of those mountains. And I can remember being awestruck with how far away you could see the light of that town. And I was struck with awe about how that town was like a beacon. And I remember thinking as a little kid, it must be so cool to live in that town. Now, why I came to that conclusion and why I thought that was great, I don't know, because I certainly came from a very flat area, except for the rolling hills that weren't really hills. So we're on a mountain. We're a city on a mountain. And we catch people's attention. And we're like the Garden of the Gods. You see, you thought I was just making reference to how I got to the mountain. But in my ethnicity, the Garden of the Gods had a reputation. And its reputation was that if you had someone very ill and you took them to the Garden of the Gods, and they were in the Garden of the Gods, most likely they were going to get healed. Now, the mountain, that garden, it was huge, had a reputation. And that reputation called people from all over the Midwest and the West. Every one of them that had the ethnicity that I had knew about the Garden of the Gods. And every one of them knew if they could get somebody to the garden, there was a high percentage that that person would be healed, because of what was invested in that Garden of the Gods. And I thought about it as I was preparing for tonight, and this is what I want to say. The church has a reputation from the Bible that people can come here and get healed. People can come here and get delivered. People can come here and overcome years of torture and habit and addiction. So now, are we going to live up to our reputation, or are we going to be what my grandfather used to call empty rain clouds that make a presentation of hope but never produce the hope? You see, this building can't heal anybody. People can walk into this building, and this building's going to do nothing for them. It's the people in the building. It's the atmosphere that we set in the building. It's the expectation that we possess as salt and light that produces something. Chris has been very honest, and you heard him today. He's walking out of Hinduism, and he's walking into a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. And in the beginning, his family thought it was a fad. In the beginning, because they have 778 gods or 58 gods, and Jesus is one of those gods, it was almost permissible until Chris started establishing he is the only God, and said, I'm never going back to the temple, and I'm never going to this, and I'm never going to do that, and I'm never going to do the other thing. And his grandmother's birthday came around, and she wanted her celebration, which is not unusual, to be in the Hindu temple. And he refused to go. And God's been working on him. Why? Because he came to a place where we believe we're light and where we believe we're salt and where we're constantly telling people, you can get delivered, you can get healed. And I'm watching that begin to take hold of him. And I'm watching him, and he said to me, I'm ready, I need this. Great. We'll do that. We have to be able to produce what our reputation is. And God began to talk to me about why years ago he told me to put the sign on the building, Jesus, Savior, Healer, Deliverer, and soon coming King. And he's downloaded so many things about why that sign is up there. You see, that's our light. That's our hill. That's our mountain. And people that drive by here, they may never walk through the door, but it's marked them to know this is possible. And we're getting so many testimonies. Sky can tell you, people in the pantry that say, you prayed for this person and they were healed. You prayed for that person and they didn't die. Now, are they walking through the doors? Sky and I are highly frustrated. It's not producing that kind of action. But it is producing a reputation. And that trip to the Garden of the Gods for me was because my family believed in its reputation. And we only went a couple of times, and I never went back. I would never go back now. I wasn't a regular attender of the garden. The garden wasn't made for regular attenders. This hill is made for regular attenders. And we need to expect regular attendance as we live up to the reputation that God put on the outside of the building. We didn't know that we were necessarily being a light on a mountain when we put it up there. I just knew I was being obedient. And when the one faded, he said to me, you get it back up there. And we put it back up. And we'll keep it up as long as he tells us to keep it up. But I want to get through these verses, and I know we're late, and I'm going to ask you a question in a minute, but go to 15, please. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. The church became ashamed of Pentecost. I can pinpoint 1920 as the beginning of that embarrassment, and it started in the Assemblies of God. And it has gradually infiltrated the whole aspect of Pentecost. We became ashamed of the emotional aspect of Pentecost. And this is what I want to say to you. True faith cannot exist without emotion. It's impossible. Faith produces passion. That's just the way it is. Faith produces hope. That's just the way it is. Faith produces excitement. That's just the way it is. And so when we take the emotion out of Pentecost, we have put it under a bushel. Now, I'm not talking about wildfire. There were tons of wildfire. But Dr. Pickett used to say to me all the time, listen, honey, don't worry about wildfire. It's easier to contain wildfire than it is to get fire built. And over the years, I've found that true. It's harder to build fire than it is to contain wildfire. And so when people couldn't contain wildfire, they became ashamed of it, and they began to put it under a bushel. And we lost our identity. And this is in verse 16. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. The word light, again, is not the normal word for light. It means fire. Let your fire so shine before men, that they may see your good works that the fire produces, and glorify your Father which is in heaven. There is a glory to the Father that comes because Orly's nephew is released for custody, and his bill was totally wiped out, and he can start life. Now our job is to pray that he keeps his promise to God, because God is so serious right now about the call of God on people's lives. He's so serious right now about the concentration of making sure that nothing stops us. Not family, not money, not health, nothing. Nothing stops us. We respond to the call of God that's on our life. And he's after that more than he has ever been, because he's opening the door one more time, that I don't know how many more times, but at least one more time, for the church to be visible fire. And it says, so shine before men. And are you ready? Give out light. We're to give out our light. It's not to shine through our windows. It's not something that it becomes a byproduct for people around us. We are literally to give out our light. And we're people that we have to find ways to say, yes, I'll pray for you. This one business that we were in the beginning of the week, this woman so pressured me that I have her cell phone. So now it's not going to be private prayers. I'm going to be periodically sending her a prayer. I'm sending my light. We have to be people willing to send our light, not just let somebody see it through the window. But we have to be actively involved with sending our light. And that they may see our good works. And the word see, you ready? Is to know about. There needs to be a reputation. People need to know. Well, if I run into Sky at Krav and I've got this problem or that problem, she'll pray for me and God's going to answer. It's like Mike and Jack knew if they came to Christian's house at 4:30 in the morning, they were going to get Jesus. They weren't going to get him to boot him off the property because it was 4:30 in the morning. They were going to get Jesus. We have to be people that people know, they discern, so that they can look at the Father and say they're the way they are because of the Father. And so what this all boils down to is we have to stay salty. We have to stay full of fire by understanding all the areas that we are to have faith in. And one of the ones that God's talking to me about, and you know that from Sunday morning, is that we've got to have faith in the power of the blood. And so it's 9:15. Are there questions? We're going to stop right here. Are there questions? Are there comments? Okay, we want to thank all of you that have been watching the class. If you have questions, if you have comments, you can contact us through the site, and we will be very happy to answer whatever questions that you have. And we're just very prayerful that this class was a great training for you as people who are ministering the word. So thank you for being with